The film commences with Margaret, the district attorney for New York City, experiencing a severe panic attack within the confines of her hotel suite. She had engaged in a sexual encounter with a young man in his early 20s, and he had tragically died in an accidental fall within the hotel room. In her distress, Margaret contacts a professional cleaner, someone skilled in discreetly resolving problematic situations. This individual arrives at her suite, and his first question is whether she has contacted anyone else regarding the incident. Margaret vehemently denies doing so and implores him to make this unfortunate accident disappear without a trace. The fixer confidently asserts his expertise in such matters. Just as the conversation is underway, a knock interrupts them, and another man enters the room. He also identifies himself as a fixer, brought in to assist Margaret. Margaret's fixer, surprised by this unexpected arrival, demands to know who summoned him. The newcomer simply gestures towards a concealed surveillance camera. Simultaneously, the hotel telephone rings. A woman, who has been monitoring the hotel's surveillance system, makes contact with Margaret. She switches the call to speakerphone, revealing her identity as Pamela, the owner of the hotel. Pamela explains that she has also engaged the services of her own fixer, driven by the desire to protect the reputation and image of her establishment. Margaret, understanding the potential ramifications for her own career as a district attorney, shares this concern. Consequently, they agree that both fixers should collaborate on resolving the situation. However, the two fixers immediately express their reluctance to work together. Pam's fixer attempts to reason with her, while Margaret insists that her chosen fixer remain involved, citing his reputation for unwavering commitment once he accepts a job. Pam eventually persuades her fixer to cooperate, while Margaret reminds her fixer that their conversation has been recorded by the hidden camera. Reluctantly, both men agree to work together and seek further information from Margaret about the circumstances of the incident. Margaret recounts meeting the young man at the hotel bar downstairs. She admits to being attracted to him and subsequently booking a room for a more intimate encounter. After consuming several drinks, the young man began jumping on the bed, ultimately falling against a bar cart and suffering a fatal injury. The fixers provide Margaret with fresh clothing and arrange for her to leave the hotel, allowing them to manage the aftermath. As Margaret's fixer begins the grim task of bagging the deceased, he notices Pam's fixer casually relaxing, sipping drinks, and making no effort to assist. While Margaret's fixer diligently removes evidence from the suite, Pam's fixer locates the young man's backpack. Upon inspection, they discover illicit drugs within the bag. They contact Pam for guidance, but she is adamant about avoiding any association with illegal substances that could tarnish her hotel's image. She instructs them to deliver the drugs to a specified drop location. Both fixers are highly independent and competitive individuals, leading Margaret's fixer to decide he will handle the situation independently. With practiced efficiency, he secured the body, wrapping it in tape and hanging it on a service trolley, cleverly disguising it as laundry. They gathered the incriminating evidence and proceeded to the parking garage. Once there, Pam's associate disabled the security camera feed, creating a momentary distraction for the security guard. Margaret's associate then drove his car into the parking area and smoothly transferred the body into the trunk. He expressed a desire to personally delete the surveillance footage, but Pam's associate refused, explaining that he had received explicit instructions to handle that task independently. At this point, a startling discovery is made. The supposedly deceased young man suddenly awakens. They realize that he had been under the influence of drugs, not actually dead, and promptly subdue him again. A disagreement erupts between the two fixers, with Margaret's associate questioning whether Pam's associate had thoroughly checked the young man's pulse. They both recognize that the young man could potentially reveal the location where the drugs were to be delivered, and decide to first bring him back to consciousness. Margaret's associate attempts to contact his medic, but his calls go unanswered. Pam's associate suggests consulting his own medic, who operates in Chinatown. During their journey, Margaret's associate deduces that Albanian mobsters recently suffered a significant loss when a shipment of newly imported goods was stolen, and speculates that the young man's boss might be involved. Upon arrival at their destination, Pam's associate and Margaret's associate each discreetly retain a brick of drugs, as a form of insurance. They meet with the medic, a woman named June. Pam's associate had assumed that June was exclusively his contact, but it becomes apparent that she also works with Margaret's associate. June's primary concern is the young man's overdose, so they carry him inside from the back alley. Upon examination, June finds an extremely faint pulse, indicating the drugs were highly potent. The two fixers resume their argument about their respective relationships with June, prompting her to order them out. They then go for drinks together, and Pam's associate confides that June once saved his life, nursing him back to health at her own residence. Margaret's associate realizes that he had been present when June was helping Pam's associate, but had been deliberately kept from meeting her. Suddenly, they spot the young man fleeing. The two older men give chase. He breaks into a shopping mall, where Pam's associate pursues him on foot while Margaret's associate circles around to the mall's exit in his car. The young man escapes the mall and runs directly into Margaret's associate's path. He leaps out of the way just before being hit, landing gracefully on his feet in slow motion. He takes off running again, leaving the two older men struggling to keep up. The young man reaches a bridge and climbs up to the highway, where he is finally cornered by both fixers. They apprehend him, put him in the car, and drive back to June's place. She administers medication to the young man and refuses to allow them inside her home. Later, they discuss where to take the young man for interrogation, as neither wants to disclose the location of their own safe houses. The young man was given some of Margaret's spare clothes, and they transported him to a motel. Margaret's associate took charge, deciding to conduct the interrogation himself. The young man played dumb, which quickly exhausted Pam's associate's patience, leading him to reveal that they had the young man's drugs in their possession. The two fixers then left the room to discuss their interrogation strategy, ultimately deciding that threatening the young man with physical violence was the most effective approach. This tactic worked, and the young man confessed that the drugs belonged to Lagrange, a notorious and powerful drug kingpin in the city. He explained that he wasn't a drug dealer himself, but was simply helping out a college friend named Diego. Diego, he said, worked for Lagrange, but Diego's mother had recently passed away, so the young man had agreed to assist him. He further explained that he had been on his way to make the delivery, but had helped himself to a small portion of the drugs. Feeling the effects of the drugs, he had gone into a bar where he met Margaret, and his next memory was waking up in her apartment after falling against a bar cart. He also revealed that he was supposed to receive the drop-off location via pager, which he needed to retrieve from a bar where Diego worked as a bartender. They drove to the bar, and during the drive, the young man wondered aloud if the two fixers were partners. Upon arriving at the bar, they heard a Croatian song playing, which alerted them to the presence of Dimitri, a dangerous Croatian gangster. They each revealed that they had previously worked for Dimitri on separate occasions. They realized that if Dimitri saw them together, he would immediately assume they were conspiring against him and likely have them killed. Despite this, neither fixer trusted the other, and they decided that all three of them would go into the bar to retrieve the pager. They entered the bar discreetly through a back entrance and observed that Dimitri was hosting a wedding celebration for his daughter. The young man went to the bar and located his pager. Instead of being handed the pager, he had to grab it himself, which resulted in his immediate capture by the bar's security. The two fixers attempted to intervene and rescue the young man, but were forcibly pulled into the lively Croatian kolo dance. While participating in the dance, they tried to remain inconspicuous, but Dimitri spotted them. They quickly drew their guns and pretended not to know each other, attempting to maintain their cover. Dimitri diffused the tense situation, confiscated their weapons, and scolded them for disrupting his daughter's wedding celebration. Unbeknownst to him, Dimitri was fooled by their act, believing they were strangers. He released them, but one of his observant henchmen, having noticed that both fixers were carrying identical guns, suspected they were working together. Margaret's associate left the bar and found the young man waiting outside in his car with a pager. The young man informed him that he had not yet received the address, so they went to a diner. While they were eating, the young man realized that the two men were professional fixers and remarkably similar in their methods. He excused himself to the restroom, leaving the two fixers to speculate about how Lagrange had obtained the drugs from the Albanians. Margaret's associate suspected a trap, fearing they would be ambushed and killed after delivering the drugs to Lagrange. Consequently, they agreed to let the young man make the delivery, deciding that if they released him, they would have to kill him themselves to eliminate any loose ends. The pager finally received the address, but the fixers did not recognize the location. The young man recognized the address, and they immediately departed. Arriving at the location, they instructed the young man to deliver the drugs while they remained outside, observing. The young man, understandably hesitant, nevertheless agreed to the task. They watched him enter the house, but their attention was abruptly diverted by the arrival of multiple vehicles filled with armed individuals. The fixers quickly deduced that these were Albanian gangsters, who had arrived to eliminate Lagrange's associates. However, their own position was then compromised by an attack from a group of Croatians. Dimitri's men unleashed a barrage of gunfire, forcing the fixers to execute a rapid retreat in reverse. Their vehicle sustained significant damage and became unusable. They swiftly moved to the trunk of the car, retrieved weapons, and returned fire on the Croatians until they ran out of ammunition. Hearing the sounds of gunfire coming from Lagrange's warehouse, the fixers headed in that direction. They encountered two wounded men stumbling out of the warehouse, who then collapsed and died. Approaching the warehouse with caution, they noticed an online tracking device inside one of the Albanian vehicles. Upon entering the warehouse, they discovered a scene of utter devastation. The Albanians and Lagrange's men had engaged in a violent shootout, resulting in the death of everyone present. While surveying the carnage, they located the young man, alive and unharmed, hiding in the trunk of a limousine. Recognizing that the young man now posed a threat to their own safety, They instructed him to return the drugs to their original locations and disappear. As the young man carried out this task, Margaret's associate, experiencing a sudden change of heart, found himself unable to shoot him. Pam's associate then fired his weapon, but, surprisingly, he also did not shoot the young man. Instead, his bullet struck the brick of drugs, revealing a concealed tracking device within. Choosing to spare the young man's life, the fixers left the scene and took the subway. Arriving at the young man's residence, he asked them what he should tell his father. The fixers issued a stern warning, telling him to forget everything that had happened, or they would kill both him and his father. The fixers then met briefly with the young man's father, a devoted Frank Sinatra fan. He inquired about the reason for their visit. The scene then cuts to the two fixers leaving for breakfast, while the young man's father appears visibly disturbed, likely due to the implicit threats they had made. At the breakfast diner, the fixers speculated about whether Lagrange had actually stolen the drugs, but they concluded that they would probably never know the true story behind the events. Margaret's associate, preparing to leave, asked Pam's associate how Pam had managed to convince him to work with him. He explained that it was due to a personal motto he had learned: you take a job, you give your word, and that word's the measure of a man. Margaret's associate realized that he also lived by the same principle. As they sat together, it dawned on them that they were both employed by the same individual, a close associate of both Margaret and Pam. He had deliberately orchestrated the entire scenario, sending them into a trap set by the Albanians, because they both possessed too much sensitive information about their employer's illicit activities. They then realized that there were men waiting outside the diner, ready to eliminate them. They loaded their weapons, preparing for a confrontation, and agreed to share their names with each other if they managed to survive. In a post-credits scene, we see the young man meeting with Margaret. He jumps on the bed, only to crash land on the bar cart, mirroring the earlier accident and suggesting a cyclical pattern of behavior. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell if you want to watch more videos like this. Thanks and see you again soon. Take care.